Hi, everyone, and welcome back to this week's Compassionate Weekly Accountability Meeting. And welcome if this is your first time here. Tonight, we're talking about that little monster inside of us that is a constant, a background voice for so many survivors of parentification, emotional neglect, and complex trauma, the inner critic. And you might know it as the voice that calls you lazy for resting or even stupid for making a mistake, which is so unfair, right? And tonight, I'm hoping that you can walk away with some insights, more compassion, and the empowerment to truly tackle, or should I say, shrink and just tell that inner critic to shut up, pretty much, because a lot of us give into it, and this may be due to so many reasons: perfectionism, the the way that we were brought up, and a lot of expectations that we have assigned ourselves and that were imposed on us. And as usual, I will be on the lookout for the comments. Wherever you are joining from, say hello. I would love to hear from you. And if we have not met, I am Karina Ivar Jacobs, licensed psychotherapist and coach, specializing in parentification and helping you heal complex trauma and generational trauma. Overall, I'm grateful that you are here, and we go live every Sunday. So if you have any questions, any comments, if anything resonates, just say hello. Hi, Loli. Welcome back. It's always wonderful to have you. Hi, it's Matilda from Brooklyn. You see, they know. And I see, some of my Self-Worth Hub member. If you're a member, please do not forget to say hello, interact, and make sure that you track your attendance within our app for a chance to win our monthly self-care gift card. So, hello, and let me know where you are joining from, and if you identify with having that nagging voice, the inner critic, right? So before we continue further, we want to make sure that we define what the inner critic is and where it comes from. So the inner critic is not some random flaw in your personality. It is actually a survival mechanism that was overdeveloped in environments where you didn't feel safe. For example, if you grew up in a household where love was conditional, where mistakes were punished, or where emotional support was absent, then your nervous system learned that being perfect, quote unquote, right? Because who is perfect, was the only way to be loved or receive attention. This is something that a lot of my clients and members can resonate, unless you were the good girl, the good boy, or you were performing, overcompensating, then you were likely not receiving love, or enough attention. So this is your way. Hi, hello. I see Rat Tokyo Nat, and I see Sarah Marie. Hi, hello from Vermont. Beautiful. Oh, it's wonderful to see you. Welcome back. And let me know at any point if this resonates, and if you have any questions, as usual, I would love to hear from you. So again, because of these environments, because of this learned behavior and criticism that we have internalized, that is why many of us have an inner dialogue that sounds like this. Okay. And please feel free to type in the comments any other narratives that may show up for you. For example, oh, I should have known better, or I'm such a failure, or no one will ever want me if I mess this up, or I'm jaded. There must be something wrong with me. right? Maybe it's true, I'm too much. And again, I will be on the lookout. Please let us know what other inner critic narratives are coming up for you or come up for you. Usually, let's say when you make a mistake or perceived mistake, that you resort to these very harsh narratives. So please let me know in the comments. And what's happening here is what experts call, right? What we call flashback inducing critic. One that was born out of danger ridden, emotionally chaotic homes or early experiences. And because that danger wasn't always physical or visible, it is, it embedded itself deep in your emotional body as hypervigilance, perfectionism, and self abandonment. However, the hopeful part is that this critic is not permanent because with intentional, trauma informed strategies, it can be softened, it can be diminished, it can be reshaped, and even transformed into inner wisdom with the right tools and awareness. Okay. And what I mean by that is, and this is an exercise that I do with my clients sometimes, and my coaching or therapy clients, where I ask them, what is the narrative that is coming up for you? Okay, so I see that's your inner critic. And in coaching, we call them gremlins, right? If you've seen the movie Gremlin, that's your little gremlin showing up. And sometimes it's very useful to give it a name, to bring it to the surface, give it a name, and even draw it. It's an exercise that my clients and I have fun doing because they get creative, and I can witness in vivo how they are metabolizing their frustration, resentment towards their inner critic, and saying, let's pretend that they named them, I don't know, Brunhilde. So they're like, Brunhilde, the way that she shows up, she tells me that I'm not good enough, that maybe I'm too difficult, that I'm always questioning everything. And Brunhilde looks like this, she has this terrible look in her face. She has this messy hair, and she's always like frowning. And they draw it, and it's very fun, and it can be, you see, we don't have to make it a sad process, or we don't have to make it dramatic, but rather like have fun with it. Make fun of yourself, your inner critic, and realize that it is not permanent, because you were not born like this. You were born with this innocent blank template, and then the world has been teaching you to become hyper vigilant, to become critical of yourself. But imagine how wonderful it would be if you just like push that inner critic away, like, get the heck out of here, right? And then told yourself, look at how wonderful you are. Look at how thoughtful you are. Look at how beautiful. Wow, you are so resourceful. And I'm saying this to all of you. I'm looking straight at the camera because I know that a lot of you who are watching this are very resilient, amazing, badass people who are often giving into this inner critic and are missing out on sharing your light with the world. So I am hoping that you get this opportunity to remember who you are at the core. And don't leave without sharing these gifts, because I can assure you that there's a lot of light within you that you may not be recognizing or tapping into because of this inner critic. All right. So, again, I'll be on the lookout. Let me know what comes up when it comes to your inner critic. So, some signs that you are in an inner critic attack are as follows, right? So, let's name it clearly, right? The inner critic has many disguises, and some common disguises, ones that I see in my clients and have experienced myself, are hmm, perfectionism, right? Feeling like you must do things flawlessly to deserve love or approval, like from the get go. Does that resonate? Like, I mean, we want to run before we crawl. And that perfectionism shows up with your intimate relationships, at work, it shows up with your family. And any perceived criticism, you take it very personal. I don't know if this resonates with you, but please do let me know in the comments. I cannot wait to hear from you. This is a very common one. Another one is all or nothing thinking. And this is a cognitive distortion. And the way that it shows up is like this. Like, for instance, if I'm not the best, if I make a mistake, then I'm a failure. And that translates into you not even trying, suffering from paralysis by analysis, or being afraid to ask questions for the fear of being judged, for not knowing. But it's like, actually, highly intelligent people and aware are those who are very inquisitive, right? They are very inquisitive, and they're not afraid of asking questions or recognizing when they're wrong, when they have made a mistake. It's an opportunity to fail forward and to grow from that experience. So I see a comment from Nat. Mine is relentless and brings up proof of when they were right. Sometimes it looks like intuition, and sometimes there's no activation energy to fight back this critic. How do you handle critics with a large war chest? War chest. Ah, thank you for sharing. Okay. Um, that's what it says. War chest. Hmm. Not familiar with that term, but I appreciate it. I think I understand. So it sounds like a very heightened, big inner critic. And I've said this before. When we are within those inner critic attacks and that all or nothing thinking, we think of the problem in this big cloud. We think in a very nebular way, and therefore we feel overwhelmed and defeated by these inner critic attacks and these negative thoughts. And that is why it would be important to find the evidence, jot down. And instead of saying, oh, wow, you see, they are saying that I am a failure, or I'm too much and I cannot trust anyone, I would invite you to decipher each narrative from that powerful inner critic that you may be having, and literally write it down and keep a journal or a notebook where you can reference these inner critic attacks. Like, what are the cognitive distortions and the narratives, the negative narratives that are coming up? And instead of thinking of tackling all of it at once, like, let's decipher, okay, what's one inner critic attack? What is the narrative? Are they saying that you're not lovable? Okay, so let's lead with that, right? So if they're saying that I am not lovable, let's look at that. Where is this coming from? And then what is the evidence that it is true that I'm not lovable, right? You write that down. And then what is the evidence against this inner critic attack that I'm not lovable? Well, there are people who love me. Oh, also I've been in environments or in an environment where people don't take accountability, or I'm in an environment where people thrive in putting others down because it makes them feel better, because perhaps I'm holding a mirror of what they are lacking and their lack of accountability. Therefore, it makes sense that they would want to put me down and make me feel like I'm too much. You see, but we take it one step at a time. It's not fair that you would want to tackle this big inner critic um, with all or nothing thinking, because that is part of the whole inner critic narrative and the attack. So a tactic is you're going to, peel the onion and the narrative, right? And look for the evidence and write it down, because more often than not, you will realize that it's your inner critic, all or nothing thinking. It's an attack. And you are basically judging your worth based on people that they themselves are not capable of showing up in an accountable way. That was just an example. And let's see. Oh, oh, Sally shows. Oh my goodness. I'm so sorry, Sally. I'm sorry for your loss. Sally says, please pray for my family. My sister passed away. I'm sorry. I'm sending you a lot of love and comfort as you are navigating this difficult time. And thank you for being here and for showing up within our community. So thank you. Um, oh. Now, as I mentioned, then there is this self hate and toxic shame accompanied by this critic, right? Like, I'm disgusting, or I don't deserve good things. So we are like futurizing and catastrophizing, right? If I don't stay ahead, everything will fall apart. For example, you micromanage yourself and others, constantly reviewing, worrying, and checking. Okay. And another way that this shows up is that we engage in a lot of like shoulds, telling yourself what you should be doing without compassion, right? And you may also engage in a lot of workaholism, trying to earn your worth through productivity. And oh boy, this shows up a lot, right? And what's powerful to know is that these are not personality traits, they are trauma adaptations. And they were born in the absence of emotional safety. Okay, I see Sally saying, thank you. I love you. I love you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Sally, for showing up despite navigating these challenging times. Okay, so I also want to point out, even though I mentioned CBT, right, cognitive behavioral therapy, however, it is important to note why logical reasoning is not enough when you are combating the inner critic. Because this is one of the mistakes that we often make, and it's trying to argue with the inner critic using logic alone. However, the critic doesn't live in logic because it lives in the emotional memory of your trauma. And this is why traditional cognitive behavioral therapy often doesn't work early in recovery from CPTSD, for example, because when you are still in fight or flight, then the critic feels like reality, like the truth, like safety, and something that is familiar, that feels like home, because it's been showing up for a while for you and now you're used to it. And that is why we must bring the wisdom of your both the left and right brain. We need more than logic. We need compassionate reparenting of ourselves. Okay. And this is why I keep on bringing up this book, Complex Trauma from Surviving to Thriving by Pete Walker. And I love some of the tools that he offers within the book. I would highly recommend it. And some trauma informed and powerful but simple tools for softening the inner critic um, can be found in that book. And I want to share with you some of them that I have practiced myself and that I teach my clients and within our Self Worth Hub membership. Number one is the thought stopping plus thought substitution, right? When the critic says or starts, we gently interrupt it, and we say, stop. Like literally, I know it sounds a bit silly, like we're going to be talking, right, to ourselves, but it's like literally like, stop. That's not my voice. That's old programming. And then what we do is that we substitute the inner critic with, I made a mistake, but I'm still lovable. Okay? You can also say, this doesn't define me. I made a mistake, and all I can do is take accountability and rectify it or try better next time. And I want to give you a scenario, right? For example, if you send a message and you do not get a response, which is something that happens to a lot of my clients and members who are anxiously attached, then your inner critic jumps in and says, oh, you must have said something wrong. You're so annoying, right? Or they no longer want to talk to you. So that is something that happens very thought stopping be stop, right? That's not my voice. And say to yourself, I'm allowed to communicate without overanalyzing. And say to yourself, their silence is not a of my worth. They're probably busy or need some time to respond. Like I bet you how many times, I don't know what's going on, that I believe my screen is going blank at times or black. I apologize about that. I'm hoping that you can all hear me well. But this is a very common one, as I mentioned. And let's see, I see a question. When you say reparenting, does it mean checking ourselves when we are doing something that's not good? No, reparenting means reparenting ourselves is engaging in the process of being the parent that you didn't get to have, engaging in tremendous amount of self-compassion. Because I bet you that while you are judging yourself a lot, right, your wounded inner child is receiving all of these messages from the inner critic. But if you tap into your loving inner parent, and this is the process of reparenting ourselves in simple terms or in a simplified definition, is that you ask your inner parent, what would your loving inner parent say? What would my loving inner parent say? Well, they're probably busy. And even if they don't respond, you're still lovable. There will always be a chance to find out, right? But that is not a reflection of you. That's a reflection of maybe their lack of time or maybe their lack of integrity in showing up for others. Who knows? It doesn't mean that they're a bad person unless, it's a pattern and they are ill intentioned. But more often than not, people get busy, people can get flaky. And if that creates a lot of anxiety, then maybe it's time for you to reevaluate that relationship because they're not showing up in alignment with the way you want to be treated and the way that you show up for others. So that is an opportunity to evaluate the relationship instead of personalizing and attributing your worth to the way that they are showing up. Does that make sense? Let me know in the comments. Okay. And then Nat says, is the inner critic a type of cognitive distortion? Yes, it can be. Absolutely. The inner critic shows up as all or nothing, criticism, perfectionism. So that is an aspect of the inner critic, is that it definitely feeds you a lot of cognitive distortions, lots of black and white, lots of catastrophizing. And that is why it is important to learn where this is coming from and challenge it. Okay. I want to give you another scenario, right? Let's say you make a small mistake at work and instantly you think, oh, I'm incompetent. This is so common, I have to say, amongst my members and clients. So the substitution that you can give it is I'm human and mistakes are how I learn, not how I am defined. You see the difference? And then write down your positive attributes and achievements and read them when you are vulnerable and your critic gets loud. And you can also create a counter voice mantra. An example is I refuse to shame myself for being human. Because more often than not, we tend to give that inner critic more real estate than your loving inner parent, right? We tend to remember when we receive the criticism or a negative experience versus the achievements, your progress, your growth, right? Let's see, Taylor B. Welcome. I don't think we've met, Taylor. Welcome. It's wonderful to have you here. Taylor says, yes, yes, it literally has nothing to do with you. It's the other person, right? But we tend to give our power away so much. Sometimes I wish I could just like tell my clients or members, like, I wish you see yourself in the way I see you, in the way that you are, but they are over there trapped in that inner critic attack. And it's so painful to watch. But my role is to be the facilitator, right? A lot of my members who are here, they know I'm your facilitator. I cannot tell you what to do, but only facilitate thought provoking questions, give you tools so that you can engage in that self exploration and arrive to your core, lovable, loving inner parent and your self-worth, right? That's why we call it the self-worth hub. Oh, thank you, Taylor. And another trauma-informed strategy is to use positive visualization and memory anchoring. For example, when the critic hijacks your mind, I want you to visualize a moment when you felt proud or safe or deeply connected to yourself, because this helps shift the brain from a flashback to being grounded in the present moment. And I want to say, I know it's not easy, it takes practice. But for example, it's like a warm conversation with a friend, or you and your pet, or completing a goal that you were proud of recently or in the past. And that's why I say keep track of your progress, not just when things are going negatively, right? And another scenario to give you a more concrete example is that you feel ashamed after receiving feedback, right? And the feedback wasn't great. And you probably received some positive feedback, but in between, you were giving some room for growth. But guess what? And let me know if this resonates in the comment. Of course, you're hyper focusing on the little negative feedback you received. So you completely discounted everything else they said. So, a visualization that you can do is to picture yourself walking out of a previous job interview that went well. Like, think about that and remembering how proud and grounded you felt. And the reason I say this is not to bypass pain, but about building capacity for emotional regulation, because we often give a lot of real estate, as I mentioned, and hold a lot of space for the inner critic. And this is where perspective correction also, especially before bed. This is another one that I would highly recommend that you start practicing today. If you're on Eastern time, right now it's 8:59, well, 9 p.m. now. So right before bed, give it a try, perspective correction. I want you to list 5 to 10 small, pleasant things from your day. Not big wins, just everyday wholesome moments, right? Goodness. It could be that you took a hot shower or you had your favorite tea, right? Or you listen to a song that you didn't hear for a while and it reminded you of how much you used to dance and you enjoyed it. Or maybe a kind word that someone said in a text. Um, Maybe the way that the sunlight was hitting your window this morning, this afternoon, and you felt warm and safe. Or maybe a stranger held the door for you and you felt seen, you see? So another example, which is, it's something that I will do today. It's like I remember to drink water today, and and I had my favorite tea, so that's good, right? Even if the day was hard, these entries retrain your brain to scan for safety and connection instead of danger, because it is something that you very likely are so used to. Again, this shifts your brain from hypervigilance and negative noticing to calm and connection. You are retraining your brain to scan for the goodness, the things that you're doing well in your life. As minute as they may seem, those are cumulative. And this is a perfect way to transition into per- perspective substitution, which is one of my favorite tools. It's about stepping out of the critic's narrow, judgmental lens and into the observing ego and compassionate inner parent, which is mindful. So you imagine how a kind coach or a loving inner parent would talk to you, right? What would they say? They would probably say, "You're trying your best. Come on, you're allowed to rest." Or, "One mistake doesn't undo your worth or your growth," right? And a scenario that I want to give you is like, let's say that you're panicking about not being productive enough today. So common amongst my members and clients, right? So the observing ego or loving inner parent may say, "I've done what I could with the energy I had. So rest is also worthy. And perhaps it was unrealistic, that little to do list I made." So another one is like, perhaps you're stuck in shame after an argument, and your loving inner parent says, "You know what? I can take responsibility without abandoning myself. And my tone does not define my entire character," which we tend to really punish ourselves when we have made a mistake, or let's say we showed anger, and we don't tend to do that, and we feel like we acted out of character. Then that can be very hard, especially if you have perfectionistic tendencies. Okay, and let me see. I see a question that says, "So is the inner critic's purpose to keep it safe since it's all we know?" That's a very interesting perspective. So that could be one of their roles, right? Because we can get comfortable in the discomfort, it can keep us, quote unquote, safe with what we know, but it can prevent a lot of growth. There is not growth in comfort. That's just the reality. So, another way that we can retrain our inner critic is to look at it from a perspective of an accountability partner, right? Wait a minute. So, what you're saying is that I was lazy? I don't like your tone, inner critic. Maybe what you mean is that I could have pushed a little bit harder, but that doesn't mean I'm lazy. So don't character assassinate me. You see the difference? So we can actually use our inner critic as an accountability coach or partner, but not give away our power to it. Does that make sense? Okay. Oh, Nat says, "Sorry for all the typos." It's okay. I'm following you. I get you. Don't worry. And then Taylor says, "I like that. I'm going to do it." I hope you try it. So thanks for letting me know. Okay. The other part, which I'm sure that a lot of you have heard this, And it's because it is effective, it works. When you're in a state of gratitude, negativity, hate, sadness, it's just they don't penetrate you. And I want to explain what I mean by that. For example, also, and not just gratitude, but reframing gratitude with trauma sensitivity in the sense that, for example, I know that gratitude can feel loaded, especially if it was used to silence your pain growing up, right? So, oh, you need to be grateful. Like, so instead of forcing gratitude, notice moments of warmth as they arise organically. Maybe you laughed unexpectedly, and maybe a breeze felt good on your skin, on your face, right? So let's say, as a scenario, that you are in a depressive low, and someone says, you should just be grateful, you know? Obviously, that doesn't help. That is actually dismissive. So instead, you gently notice, like, you know what? The tea I made this morning tasted comforting, and that mattered. And that was a way that I showed up for myself. And those are ways that I can take control of my comfort, my immediate environment at that moment. It may not solve like big problems, but that is a way that I showed up for myself. You see, and that counts because again, we tend to discount our progress and our efforts. And another example that comes up a lot is that, let's say that you're in an emotional flashback, right? And you feel disconnected. And as your nervous system calms, you tear up, and a song lyric that resonates with your pain comes up. And that is a moment of connection, right? It's authentic and it's not imposed. And that is a moment where you can say, you know what? I felt seen. Wow. Wow, that artist wrote that lyric and that resonates so much, you know. So it's a way that even if you don't have someone there to validate you can validate yourself, and you can realize that you're not the only one navigating such things. And that is why it's important to recognize that there's nothing wrong with you, because with practice, you can slowly build a foundation of authentic gratitude, the kind that doesn't shame your sadness and doesn't turn into toxic positivity. And because we are approaching the end of our live stream, I want to ask if you have any further questions or comments, or if this resonates, no? Let me know what you plan on implementing this week. I would love to hear from you, even after for the replay. I always read all the comments I receive. So let me know. And I want to leave you with this: the inner critic is not the truth, it's not your reality. It is an echo. And every time that you speak to yourself with warmth, curiosity, and compassion and protection, you are not just silencing the critic, but you are rewriting your story. And you are becoming the parent you never had, for instance, or that you needed. You are basically being the witness that you longed for, that you needed to validate you. And the voice that says, you are safe now, you are enough, and you are doing way better than you think. I can assure you of that. Again, if you have any questions before we go, now is the opportunity. And I want to take this time to remind you that if you want more tools like these, I've packed a lot of this work into our Self-Worth Hub, which is our compassionate community with an app where you can ground yourself with our grounding toolkit, and you can navigate with a laser focused curriculum, how to explore yourself, your self worth, identify where these tendencies and trauma responses may be coming from, and how to set boundaries without guilt with yourself, that inner critic, and with others, so that you can achieve inner peace and show up unapologetically you. Okay. I also want to remind you that if you have not subscribed, we go live every Sunday. So I'm hoping to see you back, and I'm here for you regardless. I'm hoping that you found this helpful, and let me know in the comments how you plan on implementing or what you are planning on implementing. Okay? And with that, I want to send you lots of love. I want to see you next Sunday. Please take care and remember your resilience. Okay? Bye, everyone. Thank you so much for interacting within the comments. I'm so grateful for you as usual. So take care and see you next week.